right, well, let's get into a discussion on faith. So I feel like this word is a little bit different from some of the other words because there are multiple applications of the word faith that aren't inappropriate, that aren't a misuse of the word. We will get into that. We will start with, if my presentation, we were having issues with the presentation. There it is. We will start with the definition of faith as given by the author of this book. The definition is to assent to the weight of evidence, to trust in the truthfulness and reliability of something or someone based on a careful search of available evidence and personal experience. The word faith is synonymous with trust, trustworthiness, and truth. The Hebrew word emet, I might be saying that wrong. If you are familiar with Hebrew, feel free to correct me. The Old Testament Hebrew word emet is what is used for faith. It also means truth. This is what I found when I just did a Google of Hebrew word emet. It's a powerful and significant word in Jewish tradition, representing more than just factual accuracy, but also faithfulness, trustworthiness, and enduring reality. What I found really interesting was this first point. The word emet is formed by the first, middle, and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, signifying that truth encompasses everything from beginning to end. One of those divine design things that I think is just really interesting. In the New Testament, the Greek word pistis is used for faith. This is also a Google search. It generally translates to faith or trust in English. It's most commonly translated as faith in the New Testament, although it can also encompass concepts like belief, fidelity, and faithfulness. So just a quick look in the concordance of my study Bible, when I looked up where the word faith is used in the Old Testament, and then I went to the Blue Letter Bible that I mentioned the other week that tells you the original word. Most of the uses of the actual word faith, were in the context of he broke faith with her or did something in good faith. When you go to the New Testament, all the word faith is used more in reference to our belief. So most of the time when we hear the word faith, we automatically think of a Christian or a religious belief. Hang on, I got a quote here and I'm not on the right page. While some today speak of the power of belief and suggest that faith is an end in itself, this is not the case with genuine faith, which is always faith in something or in someone. Faith isn't limited to just religion. That's often what we hear. Think about when you hear an interview of a politician or of a celebrity and they ask about your faith. Well, what does everyone assume you're asking about? Their religious beliefs, their Christian faith. But they may have, I have faith in my husband, I have faith in my children, sometimes, Jacob. One of them is. You can have faith in a lot of things, but it's always kind of automatically assumed that we're referring to Christian faith. It's something everyone practices all the time without even realizing it. So, an exercise of faith. First, you start with questions. Is this person being truthful? Is this someone I can trust? Is that thing safe and reliable? Did that historical event really happen? Then you go through the process of seeking answers to those questions, and you search for the truth. You gather evidence, you apply reason and logic, you form a tentative conclusion, and in final, you assent to the evidence and you take action based on those conclusions. Here's a story to illustrate. This is, I've got the wrong book. Hang on. Sorry about that. Here we go. This is a story written by Eric Metaxas. We'll come back to that gentleman here in a minute. Let's imagine a high wire artist who has affixed a cable across a dangerous waterfall and then proceeds to walk back and forth across it. A crowd gathers, of course, and upon returning from his jaunt across the taut wire, the man points to a wheelbarrow and asks the crowd whether they believe he can push it all the way across to the other side. Most people believe he can, so they nod, or they even shout yes. The high wire artist singles out a man in the front of the crowd who seemed most confident in answering affirmatively. "You, sir," the high wire artist says to the man, "you say you believe that I can wheel this across this divide. Is that true? Do you really believe it?" "I do," says the man. "Even with the heavy load inside this wheelbarrow?" "Why not? Certainly," says the man. "Very well," the high wire artist says. "I'm glad to hear it. So please help me show everyone else that I can do it by getting in this wheelbarrow." So, at that point in the story, for the man, it's no longer an intellectual exercise. It's become very personal. We do this every day. Before you sit down in an old rickety chair, is that sturdy enough to hold me? You might give it a shake. You might feel it. You might ask whoever owns the chair before you decide whether to put your faith in that chair and sit down. What about when you first had your children and you had to find someone to babysit? This precious little baby, who do I put my faith in to take care of my child as good as me? A mechanic. Got to put your faith in a mechanic. What about taking an airline flight? You're getting in a metal tube and going 30,000 feet in the air. You got to put your faith in that pilot that they know what they're doing. So, any other examples?
The 10,000 pieces of equipment that hold that plane in the air.
The 10,000 pieces of equipment that hold that plane together in the air. You got to put your faith that whoever checked all those bolts and screws and nuts did it correctly.
You have faith the sun's going to come up every morning.
Right.
You have faith your car's going to start whenever you hit the ignition. We have faith in all of it. You have faith whenever you turn your water on, the water's going to come out. Or when you flush the toilet, it's going to flush and not go all over your floor. We have faith in all those kind of things, but sometimes they don't work out.
Right.
But if that does happen, and you need some good insurance.
Please give us a call. I'm losing faith in my car, so the more policies we could write, the sooner I can get a new car. I'm just kidding. So faith is a basic necessity of life. We exercise it in hundreds of ways in our everyday lives without even realizing it. So what then is Christian faith?
It is a God-given faith. It's a faith that...
Hang on. Yeah.
Well, Christian faith is a God-given faith because we are incapable of having enough faith in God to save us ourselves. God gives us that ability. We can't have the faith required for salvation without God's input. So I would not want to rely on my own faith to deliver me into redemption. I'd much rather rely on God's faith. And whenever we're talking about faith, faith has a little bit of uncertainty in it whenever we're talking about faith in things, but whenever you're talking about faith in God and His ability to deliver you to eternal redemption, there is zero questioning of His ability to do that. He can do it, and there's no need to worry about it. It's not a hope, it's a certainty. And that's the difference between faith in things and faith in God.
Okay, any other thoughts? What is Christian faith? You want to work the mic? That'd be great.
Dead people can't have faith. We are all spiritually dead since the fall until the Spirit gives us new life.
Any other thoughts? Christian faith. You do go through the same process right here, Chad, Mr. C. You go through the same process. You ask questions. Who is this God? Can I believe the Bible? We start looking at the evidence around us, and you finally have to assent to faith or not.
Seems like I learned something about in doctrine class that faith is your connection to God. like the, when the woman, the lady that was healed, Jesus says, your faith has made you well. So, because she was connected, now connected. And, it's not something we do. Well, in my opinion, it's something God does for us.
Okay. We are going to put a pin in the discussion of Christian faith and come back to it in a minute. But at its very basic level, Christian faith means the object of your faith is Christ and the work he did on the cross. Obviously, most of us in here are pretty mature Christians. We know there's a whole lot more to it, but at its very basic level, that is a Christian faith. So let's talk for a minute about the redefinition and the cultural view of faith. So, according to the author, the redefinition of faith is affirming the truthfulness of something without regard to evidence or even despite a lack of evidence. If you'll remember the original definition that I read, it said with evidence, believing something because of the evidence. The Oxford Dictionary of English Language says a strong belief in God or the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. Again, here, this one assumes that faith has to do with some sort of religious belief. Mark Twain is quoted as saying, having faith is believing in something you just know ain't true. Richard Dawkins, he has a whole bunch of degrees, I believe. Is he alive still, or did he pass? Okay, he passed away. He, unless he made some sort of change on his deathbed, he was a big-time atheist. Yeah, he's probably, if he's dead, he's not an atheist anymore. But he's got a whole bunch of science backgrounds. Anyway, point being, he is quoted as saying, faith is blind trust in the absence of evidence, even in the teeth of evidence. I'm not sure what that meant. He's up here. My brain doesn't quite go that. I'm not sure what he means by teeth of evidence.
Well, to parallel with an atheist, I've heard the story that up at Glen Rose, in the bed of the Paluxy River, there's dinosaur tracks. Well, a flood came along and washed some rock away and exposed some new tracks, and within the track was a human footprint. Impossible, because humans weren't alive when dinosaurs disappeared, so they couldn't be human footprints in there, because dinosaurs disappeared like 70 million years ago. Well, they had an atheist there, and they're showing him these tracks, are trying to, and is doing the show, and they turn to him. He has his back to the tracks. He refused to look into it. He says, I see nothing here that disproves evolution.
Okay.
He refused to look
Okay.
into the track and see the human footprint.
So, refusing to believe in God despite there being some evidence. I think that's what he meant by the teeth of evidence. Thank you, Bill. And then Bertrand Russell, who was another big science guy, I'm not familiar with him, but he's quoted as saying, a firm belief in something for which there is no evidence. So in other words, faith is just a blind leap. And this is a misconception that has been fully institutionalized across the Western Hemisphere. Faith is a blind leap. Look at the Oxford English Dictionary. They acknowledge that faith has mostly to do with a creator or with a God, with religion, yet despite there being no proof. So most of the world says there's no proof for God. So Richard Dawkins, back to this guy, he was an evolutionary biologist, a man of science. So it's pretty ironic that he would have that definition of faith, because how do you do science without faith? Quote from the book, science is grounded on faith in unchanging natural laws and the orderliness and predictability of creation. Scientific endeavor is grounded on faith in natural laws that are so precise, orderly, and regular that it's impossible to communicate them mathematically. So we have evidence for God all around us. Romans 1 verse 19, God tells us, what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen and understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. God created it. It is written on our hearts to see God in the creation around us. That is the evidence. God tells us it's there. So how has the definition of faith gotten so turned upside down to say, well, there's no proof? I'm going to read one other quote here just to drive home the point that there's evidence. This is Eric Metaxas again. Today, there are more than 200 known parameters necessary for a planet to support life, every single one of which must be perfectly met or the whole thing falls apart. Without a massive planet like Jupiter nearby, whose gravity will draw away asteroids, 1,000 times as many would hit the Earth's surface. The odds against life in the universe are simply astounding. The odds against life in the universe are simply astounding. Yet here we are, not only existing, but talking about existing. What can account for it? Can every one of those many parameters have been perfect by accident? At what point is it fair to admit that science suggests that we cannot be the result of random forces? Scientists who persist in claiming that the universe burst into existence by chance can only do so by making the most extravagant leap of blind faith. Interesting. So, again, how did we get here? Y'all have heard mentioned in this class multiple times the pre-modern era, post-modern era, the Age of Enlightenment. That happened during the 18th and 19th centuries, and that is when scientific discovery was surging. We were figuring out all sorts of things. And you began to see a shift as from God being the moral authority to science as a moral authority. The ideology that came out of that was that science and religion are at war with one another. Science tells us what's true and therefore publicly authoritative, serving as the basis for public policy, law, education. Things that science can't study, like spiritual reality, God's morals, ethics, those are deemed matters of faith and private belief. Through science and human reason alone, we should be able to come to know everything. We no longer need to appeal to a supernatural realm to explain various phenomena as people did during the Dark Ages. If you have heard the name Stephen Hawking, he was the famous scientist that was in a wheelchair and had, I don't remember what the condition was. Oh, ALS, okay. He is quoted as saying, "Before we understood science, it was natural to believe that God created the universe. Now, science offers a more convincing explanation." So there was this shift in mentality. As society became less and less Christian, it became more and more focused on science, which claims you can't prove the existence of God. But look around you. Those 200 parameters that I just mentioned. Why is that such a harder thing to believe than that some gases, which we don't know where they came from, combined to cause an explosion which caused what we see now? Let me find it. Richard Dawkins. Sorry, folks. Richard Dawkins was married 4 times. Okay, he does not have faith in love or commitment. I can't find it. Here we go. Okay, he once said, "Biology is the study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed with a purpose." He readily admits that biological organisms, such as a DNA molecule, the human eye, or a hummingbird's wing, show an overwhelming evidence of design and purpose. But then he makes a blind leap against the clear evidence, concluding that these things are in fact not designed, but arose purely by chance through a purposeless process of material evolution. Is that not the most blind, extravagant, or not blind, but most extravagant leap of blind faith? So, I think modern society has two misunderstandings of faith. That it always has to do with faith in God, with the Christian belief. There are more applications of the word faith. And the other misunderstanding is that because we can't see God in body, that there's no evidence for it. And therefore, any kind of faith is a blind leap. Would you agree or disagree? Does it even matter? The fact that most of the world thinks of religion when you say the word faith. Is that a good thing, a bad thing, neutral thing? Doesn't matter?
I always think faith is a feeling, too.
Faith is a feeling. I see some hands, Chad.
You know, we talk a lot about how science does stuff. Really, math is what proves it. And so, if you go back to, is there more than one math possibility? I'm pretty sure there's not, but I could be wrong. And so, for me, God is a mathematical God. You can't change that.
Yeah. Mathematical. 2 + 2 always equals 4. It's supposed to.
So in regards to the term faith in a secular world, I always see it as an opening door to be able to share what faith really is. I'm often at work in a situation where I can say, hey, by the way, you know I have a faith life. Can I pray for you? So I consider it to be neutral. I consider it to be neutral as a way of beginning a conversation where we can introduce the gospel. So take it for what it is, whether we look at faith from a secular perspective or something from a more LCMS style understanding. Don't let the word faith be a bad word to you, but let it be a door.
Good. I think that's it's an open door. That's a very good point. Because if somebody brings up faith, ask them, well, define your terms. What do you mean by faith? Faith in what? Faith in whom? Any other thoughts?
You were talking about evidences of faith, and that as Christians, we have strong evidence. Those that are following through the reading through the Bible in the Old Testament right now, we're in Isaiah, and over we hear the prophet speaking God's words, where God says that he's the only God. What he says, that he can tell the future, and we can know that he is there and that he is true and that his word is true, because that future happens. Here, right in our current reading, he's talking about the Babylonian captivity. This is before. Everything is perfect in Jerusalem. It's going great. The economy's good, everything's good. And here's this prophet saying, you're fixing to be overrun by the Babylonians. Well, the Babylonians aren't even in power yet. It's Assyria still. And, they escaped the Assyrians because good King Hezekiah was in power, and he prayed, and God sent his angel, and 185,000 or 186,000 which woke up dead in the Assyrian army. And Sennacherib tucked his tail, went home, and died. So the Babylonians aren't even in power, but he's calling them out by name, and then he says, my servant Cyrus, by name, he says that the Persian that comes to power will send the people back. Well, they ain't even gone yet. Everything's going great. It's kind of like our country right now. The economy's doing, everything's pretty well. That's what Jerusalem was. And here's Isaiah talking about the fall of Jerusalem, the captivity, and the return. And it all happened just like God said, like 150 years before it took place.
Mm-hmm. If you look at the Bible just as a historical document and compare it to other historical documents, I don't know the number, maybe somebody knows, but there is a number, like how many prophecies from the Old Testament came to be true exactly as they were said. They were all fulfilled. And the number is pretty big. It's in the hundreds, I think. And so, just that alone is evidence, I think, that you can believe what's being said. So, does anyone else have any examples of the misunderstanding or redefinition of faith in today's culture and today's society before we
Well,
keep going?
I think it allows people to be lazy because they say, well, I have faith this is going to happen, but they don't really put any effort into ensuring that it's going to happen. I have faith that we're going to be able to do this. I have faith that whatever's going to happen is going to, and it's allowed Christians to be lazy to some degree too, because they have faith that God's always going to work things out for their good according to his purpose. But what is his purpose? You know what I mean? He tells us to have dominion over the world. He doesn't tell us to sit back and watch everything just, fall to pieces. So you can use faith as an excuse to not do anything. You can use faith to just sit there and watch it happen because you have faith in the end, it's all going to work out. But in reality, God calls us to do stuff, right? He doesn't. We don't.
You're stealing my thunder, Chad.
Huh?
I said you're stealing my thunder.
But, I mean, isn't that really? I mean, that's what we see in the world today. I see it in my kids that they use faith to be lazy. They do. I don't know. That's just man. I have to write articles occasionally for some publications, and this friend of mine writes articles as well. So he sent me one, right? And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, "Did you write this?" He said, "Well, AI wrote about 75% of it." And I said, "Did you read it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Does it make sense?" He said, "Well, kinda, but he has faith that people just will look at that and think it's okay, but that's just being lazy. That's letting AI, because, I'm sure I thought about that. I wonder if I can do my lessons with AI in here, where I can get it to do a PowerPoint presentation. I can bring it in here, we'll put it up and see how it goes, But I think we're really lazy because we just don't put the effort into, and I see it all the time at work where I do a lot of fluid dynamics work and a lot of physics calculations based on different aspects of fluid dynamics. And I can calculate stuff out and go, okay, this doesn't make sense. You look at this and this should not work. But the people that are out there in the field for me taking readings go, oh, well, it's close enough. I'm like, no, it's not close enough. Do the calculation. But they're using faith that, hey, everybody's going to accept what I'm saying, so it's okay. When it's not.
We will expand on what Chad's talking about here in just a second. But I don't know if this billboard is still there, but years ago along the 130 toll, somewhere between here and Hutto, there was a big billboard that said, "Think rain. Together we can make it happen." And I remember driving past it and Jeff and I talking about it. I'm like, what? I don't get it. Think rain. Think rain. Like, instead of saying pray for rain, think rain. Together we can make it happen. Well, I mean, that's not the word faith, but that kind of illustrates, like, what are you putting your faith in that's going to make it rain? Our brains? The power of positive thinking?
Well, a lot of people believe in a mass consciousness existence where the combined efforts of everyone's consciousness thinking about the same thing can cause things to happen. And that's what they're talking about. And that's fairly common belief where if there's some late night radio people that you can listen to, let's say, okay, we're all going to think about doing this and see if it happens, And then sure enough, it happens. Well, it was supposed to happen anyways. It's not like they got that, but they believe in a mass consciousness.
Again, it's kind of this mirror image of what prayer is. That innate thing that I'll think about it. Well, no, pray about it. There is power in prayer, especially prayers of the masses, but just thinking about it, that's the devil, I say. Anyway, all right, we're going to go back now to the definition of Christian faith. Faith is a central theme in the Bible. Hebrews chapter 11 is the by faith chapter. It begins with the definition in verses 1 and 2. Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. The King James Version I like because it says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I like that word evidence in there. So, what is the object of faith in these verses? What is the object of faith?
Jesus is the object of faith. That they're looking forward to a Messiah,
Yeah.
and we're looking back toward a Messiah. So,
Christ and his promises that he makes to us in Scripture. If we keep reading, the author of Hebrews goes on to list who he means by these ancients. And each one of these starts with the words by faith. By faith, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab. Those are just a few of them. But then we're told what they did by faith. So looking at a few of them, verse 4, by faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark. By faith, Abraham, when called to go, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. By faith, Moses left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Even if you're not familiar with all of those stories, we can look at just those little short pieces of it. What do they all have in common? What do they all have in common?
Simple trust. No, they have simple trust. It is a trust that what God says is what will happen. And they didn't know who Jesus was. They may have encountered Jesus in a pre-incarnate form, but they listened to God's word and accepted it as this is what he said, so this is what will happen. So that's one pillar. There are basically four pillars to faith, but that is one aspect of it right there. Just a simple trust that God is who he says he is, and that he is faithful to his word.
Okay, a simple trust. Look at it from a perspective, if you didn't know all of these stories, and all you're looking at is what I have there, what do they have in common? Action. All of these people did something by faith. They got in the wheelbarrow. They got in the wheelbarrow. They all took action. They didn't just acknowledge God. They took action because of their faith. And here's where I think we mistakenly use the word faith often, even within the church. We use the word faith when what we really mean is just an intellectual belief. One might say they believe the Bible and they believe that Jesus is the Son of God. But is that really faith, or is that just a belief? Is it enough for salvation to just say, I believe in that? The book of James, chapter 2, verse 19, he writes, you believe that there's one God? Good. Even the demons believe that.
Well, the difference, once again, though, is believing that God is capable of doing what he says he's going to do. That's the kind of faith we're talking about. You know, you can have faith in lots of stuff.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Faith
We'll
is
get
just
there. But my question is, the word belief and the word faith, do they really mean the same thing in the context that we use them today?
Yes.
I would say no.
Because I go back to your example, Satan has talked to God, been in his presence.
Hang on. I forget that everybody can't hear you.
I think there's a difference between belief and faith. Satan knows God. We see in Job where he talks to God. He tempted Jesus. He knows these people. Yet I don't see him going to heaven when it's all over, because he believes them, he knows them. He knows them better than we do because he's face to face. But he doesn't have that faith of action, of putting his faith in them. So I think faith and belief are two different things.
I think, if we were to do a deep dive on the root word, the root Greek and Hebrew and all that word of the word belief, we could come up with them being the same thing. But the way that we use them today, when you have somebody who says, sure, I believe in God, but you see no evidence of it other than that. And so I think what I'm getting at is, what is a saving faith? What is a saving faith? I see Pastor Zach raising his hand. Hopefully it's not to contradict me, but maybe. If I need correcting, please do. And we're going to discuss this further.
So to your point, Robin, in the Bible, faith and belief, part of the problem that we have is that you can't turn faith into a verb. It's only a noun in English. The only verb that we have to describe faith is believe. In Greek, in the New Testament, it's all one word family. Pistos is the word for faith. Pisteuo is the word for belief. Now, in the 21st century, we do use them differently, but it's really important for us as Christians then to kind of take that non-saving faith and to say, hey, listen, this is the way that the Bible uses it, and so let's not let somebody else get the word. Let's take the word back. Because in biblical usage, faith, believe, and trust are all essentially synonyms for each other. And the key in all of these, right, is your faith, and this may have already been said, I'm sorry I came in a little bit late. Your faith is only as good as your object. And so what we do, and this would be the non-saving faith, okay, we tend to draw another word into kind of our word salad in faith, belief, and trust, and that's the word wish. We turn the word faith and basically make it synonymous with the word wish. I wish, I could win the lottery. I wish I could get well. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Wish doesn't get you nothing. And so a wish is an unsaving faith. A faith, belief, trust in God that centers on Jesus is a saving faith. One thing I didn't mention in the message, but in Hebrews 12, verse 2, when it says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, right after that it calls Jesus these two things, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. What's a pioneer? Someone who goes in first, blazes a trail. What's a perfecter? Someone who comes in last and gets things just right. So from beginning to end, if your faith isn't focused on Jesus, something's wrong. And the trick the devil will try to pull every single time, is to add something to Jesus. Sure, he's the Son of God, but maybe he's not quite the Son of God, right? Sure, you can believe in Jesus, but you don't have to believe Jesus, what Jesus says. He'll try to mess with the object of your faith, which is Jesus. And so, if you want to know if your faith is saving, just ask, is Jesus the beginning and the end of my faith, or is there something else kind of getting in there that's messing with that? My 2 cents.
Oh, thank you. So I grew up here at Zion, grew up lifelong Lutheran. My family's been Lutheran going back as far as I can find. And I decided to attend a Baptist university, a very, very Baptist university. So it was very weird to arrive on campus and have everyone, as you're meeting, as part of the introduction, they would always ask, well, when were you saved? Well, I have a date, and they love to tell their exact date, time of their conversion story. And while that's not necessary, I don't think you can pinpoint an exact time and place for everyone. I do think that having that helps you to understand that believing that God is real is the first step. But as we hear in James, even the devil believes that.
Well, I think that's
the next step is submitting to God. It's submitting to God and recognizing him as your God. before I run out of time, I want to read an excerpt. We may or may not agree with everything in here. This is, I mentioned Eric Metaxas. He is a theologian and a historian, and he wrote a biography of Martin Luther, and he wrote a biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And even though he's not Lutheran, he wrote a biography of Martin Luther. And they're big, thick, long books. So I feel like he did a pretty thorough deep dive into those two people. And a few years back, he felt like he started seeing a correlation in what was going on in the United States today and what was happening during Dietrich Bonhoeffer's day. And so he wrote this book, A Letter to the American Church. That's the background of where this comes from. But there's a chapter in here titled Two Errors of Faith. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from it and try to summarize. And then we'll talk about it. Theological and other errors often arise in reaction to a previous error. In other words, by reacting so strongly to one error, we may actually go too far in the right direction and find ourselves in opposite error. We were drifting toward a certain ditch, and before we went into it, we jerked the wheel so hard in the other direction that we overcorrected and went into the ditch on the other side. Similarly, we may appreciate a good thing so much that we end up making an idol out of it and end up worshiping it instead of worshiping God. In a way, this is what happened to the idea of faith, which had fallen into rather hard times until roughly 500 years ago when a dowdy monk named Martin Luther happened to rediscover it. Luther had lived in a world in which the focus was on one's behavior, or what we call works. And it had become so important that the church had lost sight of the simple idea that it is not we who save ourselves by our efforts, but God who saves us by his sacrificial death on the cross. All we need to do to be justified is to believe in him and in what he did. That's our job. If we believe, all else that is necessary will follow. So when Martin established the centrality of faith, and more than the mere centrality, but the very necessity of faith to one's salvation, he was doing something vitally important. And it was a bracing corrective to centuries of confusion on the issues. But we should see that in doing this, he opened the door to some other theological troubles. The book goes on to summarize, if you know anything about Martin Luther, he spent a lot of time beating himself up trying to be perfect. He wanted to identify every single little sin of thought, word, deed. He would whip himself. Constant confession. And so eventually, in studying the scriptures, he found the cure for his spiritual malady. And when he found it, he nearly burst for joy. What Luther read not only changed him forever, but through him, it changed the world forever. For what he read was that we are not justified by our works, but by our faith. It was simply that simple. But in his understandably giddy joy, Luther may sometimes have gone a bit farther than necessary, or at least opened the door for others to do so. For example, when he translated Romans 3, verse 28 from the original New Testament Greek into German, he added the single word alone to the following sentence, which is, "For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from the works of the law." Luther's version was, "Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith alone without the deeds of the law." Luther felt the need to add that word to underscore what for him was essentially the central idea in the universe, and he may be forgiven for this. But this tiny two-syllable addition was not the end of the subject. When translating the entirety of the New Testament into the German of his day, Luther thought that he should leave out the Epistle of James, since it not only didn't make this point clearly, but almost seemed to contradict it. In typical Luther-esque fashion, he mocked and derided the inescapably canonical letter as an epistle of straw. Eventually, he began to change his mind. But what is it in James that he had a hard time reconciling? Well, let me read from James. It says, "What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? Someone will say, 'You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works.' You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless?" I'm going to skip ahead. He had a hard time reconciling that whole faith without works is dead. There's more to believing than mere intellectual assent. But to Luther, who was essentially obsessed with the idea that we are justified by faith alone, such verses were flies in the ointment. Nonetheless, what James wrote was a necessary corrective to those for whom faith had pushed away the vital need to actually do good and has remained such to this day. The clear implication of what James is writing is that God expects infinitely more of us than to simply say, "We believe." Many of those to whom he was writing must have been guilty of this misunderstanding of belief. He makes it clear that the idea that we must only believe or have faith was self-refuting nonsense, and explains that it is actually what we do that matters because our actions illustrate what we actually believe. So if we don't do good works, we obviously do not have the faith we claim. If we do not do the things that proceed from real faith, we cannot simply claim to have faith. If we are not doing the works that normally proceed from faith, we manifestly have no faith. And so we are in fact not justified before God, which is a chilling thing to consider. So a quick way to look at that is the pendulum was over here. All that mattered was works. You could earn your way to heaven. And in Luther's redefinition, or clarification rather, it swung all the way to the point of faith is all you need. That's just it, I believe. That's all you need. But what about those works? Where do they fall in there? They don't save us, but why are they still so important?
Well, I think works are the evidence of your faith.
Works are the evidence of your faith.
What is it you want to do? Sometimes it comes down to that. Is that your faith? Yeah. Well, if you have faith, well, what do you want to do?
Sometimes, I might get in trouble for this. As Lutherans, we know a lot about Martin Luther. And so, faith alone, faith alone, faith alone. And we don't talk about the works all that much. The Baptists have that moment of salvation. Is it too without that moment, does it sometimes make it easy to have a false sense of salvation? Focusing on all you need to do is believe. I come to church every Sunday. I'm good. And that's what I'm getting at. Faith versus a saving faith. A saving faith. And I think, here's where I think the church, not our church, the church at large, has kind of made the mistake of watering down what faith is. We use faith interchangeably with the word believe, when faith encompasses so much more than just an intellectual assent that, yes, God is real.
Well, I would say Luther was 100% correct in his assessment that faith is what is going to get you into heaven,
Right.
not works. But I think having the evidence of the faith is crucial because it keeps you from being lazy about your faith, maybe.
Right. Like I said, some churches preach a gospel that doesn't ask anything of us. Some really water it down to the point where it's not even the gospel anymore. And other times, I think, although a church is still preaching the gospel, it's kind of a soft gospel We focus everything on what Christ did for us, and that is the most important part. There is absolutely nothing we can do to contribute to our salvation. But if we don't deny ourselves, if we don't submit to Christ, have you really come to faith? While the mic gets over here, I'm going to bring up an example. I taught in a Lutheran school for a couple years, about 20 years ago. And I had a student there. He grew up at an LCMS church. He went to the LCMS school. I have not seen him in person since then, but he found me on social media, and he's very active in putting stuff out on social media. He has become a pastor. He seems to love to read about Martin Luther. He posts a lot of really good in-depth stuff that I agree with, that's very true, that's very great. But what if I told you he's a pastor in the ELCA church and he's married to a man? So, from what I read in the Bible, I wouldn't want to die in that situation because I can't confidently, I know where I think he's probably going. There are some that might argue with me. But when God clearly says you must deny yourself to follow me, is he denying something that God tells us is not only wrong, but it is completely against the way God made and designed us? Is that a saving faith? We had right here first, and then Bill.
Follow me.
Let Lewis go, and then I'll get you the mic.
You talked about faith and works in one of Billy Graham's crusades. He said, you don't clean yourself up and come to God. You come to God, and God will clean you up. So if you have that faith, God will clean up your life, and that will be shown to the world by what you do and how you live. In last week's sermon, Pastor Coppersmith said, live justly, love holy, walk humbly. If we're doing that, it's because of the work that God is doing in us, and that is being done in us because of our faith in God. So the works will happen if you truly have faith in God and have turned your life over to him. If you have not, there probably won't be those evidence that you have. So the works are the evidence of what has happened.
Yeah, works are the evidence that the gospel has taken a hold of your heart, that you have truly submitted and given over to Christ. Bill?
Yeah, when you said follow me, I think that's the key. We have faith, but is that faith strong enough to follow and do what Jesus did? That's the works part, the follow.
And just to clarify in my story about the former student, we are all sinners. There is daily where I fail at denying my gluttony or my tendency to gossip or my tendency to have a potty mouth. But I recognize that those are sins. When we completely thumb our nose at something that God says is wrong, you are worshiping yourself and not God. You are saying, I know better. So just wanted to clarify. Any other points on our discussion here about saving faith? Where's my microphone?
Back to the verse about James and then the Martin Luther. I feel like they're not contradictory, that Martin Luther saying that faith alone, he's right, that is what saves you, right? Faith, so that's a between you and God thing. The works thing is, yes, agree with everything that's been said about that works are the evidence of your faith, but that's a between people. That's an external thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I can have the saving faith, the faith alone, and that's between me and God, but the works is for other people, right? That's part of what can bring other people to God, is seeing my works, seeing what I do and take out to other people. can help bring other people. So I don't feel like they're contradictory at all. I feel like it's one of them is between God and you, it's this way, and the other one is external between you and other people.
Right. And again, define what faith is. Faith is what saves, yes. But that this way part, that evidence of it, that is evidence of it. I want to play a quick video clip if it will play. Oh, okay. Well, we now went away. I will have to tell you what it said, but he said it way, way better. That was Bodie Baucham, if you caught the picture of the gentleman. I've mentioned him before. He, to summarize, he says that all that the gospel requires of us is faith and repentance. And he said, I know some of you are going to ask, but what about obedience? Obedience is what happens because of faith. Obedience is what faith produces. Obedience is that evidence. So, it's evidence of a conversion, that you've truly given your life over to Christ as God. When we look at King David, he's called a man after God's own heart. But we read story after story after story of all his screw-ups. Horrible, big-time screw-ups. But yet God calls him a man after his own heart. Why is that? Well, every time he had a screw-up, David was confronted. And what did he say? I didn't do that. Oh, I knew better. It's okay. Is that what he? No. He said, you're right. He humbled himself and he recognized God is God and he is not. So, that being said, we should want to be obedient to God, but we are sinful human beings. We're going to fail daily. But that humility in knowing that it was failure, in knowing that it was sin, and in repenting of that, those are those works. That is that evidence of faith. And I think here in the church, especially, we need to make sure we are fully defining our terms. What is faith? It is more than a mere intellectual acknowledgement of God. Final thoughts. Is that too un-Lutheran for y'all? I spend too much time at a Baptist university and watching Baptist preachers like Bodie Baucham. Right here, Jacob.
I just want to share my wheelbarrow chart. I have a chart at home, and it says, faith is knowing that if you must step off a high cliff, either a step will appear or you'll be taught how to fly.
Final thoughts on faith. Miss Marion.
I think that one of the greatest men of faith is Job. God did not come to him and say, now I'm going to tempt you, and let the devil tempt you. Everything that came to him, the devil talked to God, and he said, I'm going to take this man, and I'm going to make him unfaithful to you, basically. And through all, he lost everything. His friends despised him, his family despised him, and said, give up. But his faith was whole, and he did not give up. And how did it turn out? God blessed him so richly for it. And I think sometimes when things happen to us, we just say we want to give up. And so that's how important faith is to me.
How could a loving God allow this to happen? That's a common question. And Job, lots and lots happened to Job, but he never cursed God. He submitted to what God allowed to happen to him. So final thoughts. One more back here. We're running over time. If you need to sneak out for late service, please don't feel like anyone's judging you.
So faith is also a means of grace, because it is through faith that we are able to receive the forgiveness the mercy, and the childship of God. So if we do not have faith, we are not accessing the means of grace either. Just trying to make a Lutheran statement there. But we have to be very careful to remember that it is through faith that we do have access to all of that through the sacraments as well.
Anyone else? All right, we need to wrap it up. Let me close this with a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your Holy Spirit and the power of faith that he gives to us. Please help us all to be mindful and to examine ourselves and ask ourselves, are we fully submitting to you? Are we denying ourselves? Have we allowed true faith to take hold in our hearts? And allow us to witness that to other people. Be with us this week. Bring us all safely back here next Sunday. We ask these things in your name. Amen.